the disclaimer. Can you copy paste it real quick into chat? Hello, you guys. Welcome to another edition of Keystone Masters. My name is Derry, and I am here today with the boys, Zyronic and Automatic Jack. Unfortunately, we have lost our friend Nagora for today. She is not feeling too well. We want to remind you guys, Keystone Masters is completely a volunteer event from all of us. Nobody is paid, including myself and our other producers, Sierra and Shine. Thank you so much for being here. And you guys, we have a great show for you today. You're going to see some new teams. You're going to see some returning teams. And we're going to see some great dungeons. So, Zyronic, what are you most excited to see today?
Well, I'm excited to see the rematch between Polite Children and Paint for Femme later on today. I think that's going to be a great rematch. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Polite Children can take some revenge after losing away Waycrest Manor last week.
And Jack, we've got another returning team. We've got Spaghetti coming back. We haven't seen for a few weeks. Who are you excited to see today? Jack.
I think he's muted.
Push to talk is strong. Push to talk is strong, yeah. Definitely, like Zyronic said, the Polite Children Paint for Femme rematch would be very cool to be able to see as well. Some very high Rio teams going up against each other, but also just to be able to see, because everything is on that kind of same level, be able to see a couple different dungeons in the Waycrest Manor and Shrine a little bit later on.
Yeah, so we've got a real mix. We're talking about Rio scores. We've got a real mix today. We've got some really high scoring teams. Again, Polite for Children versus Paint for Femme will be our second match. They're coming back both sitting about 2,600 each. Our first match of the day is going to have Wayne Train versus Train Deplete. So I'm thinking about taking the train to Keystone Master Town. And it's terrible. I don't even know where I was going with that. But all aboard. I think after the bad jokes, we probably should get right into it here soon. So we are going to start taking a look at these teams, and we'll get right into the matches. All right, you guys, so here we go. Now we can see we got Train Deplete versus Main Train. Initial thoughts with these comps, Zyro?
Nothing too crazy here. We have the two sort of like meta tanks right now with Blood DK and Brewmaster, as well as, same thing, probably two of the more meta healers as well with Mistweaver and Resto Druid. As far as DPS goes, the thing that I noticed a little different, we have one rogue running combat, one rogue running assassination. I'm interested to see if the actual increase in boss damage from the assassination is going to be what keeps Wayne Train on this tyrannical setting.
Healer matchups, Jack, what are you thinking?
From this point, I really like to be able to have that combination of Outlaw Rogue and the Mistweaver Monk, being able to have that physical vulnerability that you can add on to be able to just utterly annihilate so many of the mobs that are going into this. So big thing to look at is just, for Elliot, just being able to actually get the spinning crane kick in, applying the debuff of all the mobs as rapidly as he possibly can, just having the largest trash packs possible to let Blade Flurry just destroy everything. So it'd be very cool to see. But otherwise, it will be kind of like the DPS challenge between the two healers on that 13 level. And bigger the pulls, the better the Mistweaver Monk's going to be able to do, really.
Definitely. So I think we predict we're going to see some really big here. And let's get right into it and find out which Manor. Off we go.
Alrighty, Zyronic. Waycrest Manor on the tyrannical setting with, I believe, teaming and volcanic here. So quite a nice Waycrest compared to the last couple weeks of M+ in Season 1 that we've seen thus far. So really cool to be able to see some of these pulls coming out.
Oh yeah, and I'm interested to see what happens here at the start of the map. Last week we saw differing doors from both teams. We had one team at top left, which is obviously the ideal door, and we had one team at the bottom right door, which is worst case scenario. But we did see both teams instantly use Shroud last week and just go straight to the boss that they had. It looks like they're doing the same thing here. Actually, no. Wayne Train's instantly going to pull the 7 Soul Essences right away, and
I think that they were looking to see what the room was going to look like, and because it's that bottom right corner, they're saying, oh, okay, we can actually make some hyper-aggressive play here because we have all the extra trash mob in the lobby, and then we're going to pull into the bottom right, grab everything together, and just have a huge Bloodlust pull here. So you're seeing the Wayne Train side getting everything in together, getting everything line of sighted. Bloodlust is going to be going up here, so they're just going to be able to stack everything up. You're just going to start seeing the Rogue and Demon Hunter just go absolutely insane with some of the damage they're going to be able to pump out.
Yeah, this is a disgusting pull. On top of that, it's actually incredibly dangerous. These survivalists in this pack actually have pretty high one-shot potential, even on this tyrannical setting. If any of these, too many of these serpent casts get off, it's going to be pretty dangerous for them. But it looks like they deal with it pretty.
Yeah, you were seeing like the double serpent cast going off onto everybody there. So, quite a big healer check. You are seeing an Incarn going up on the side of Oro just to be able to make sure keeping everybody healthy there. But they do a fantastic job being able to just annihilate everything very rapidly. On the side of Train Deplete, I believe it is the top left corner that they're actually going to be dealing with here. So actually, top right. So it will be just good for them to be able to get everything in together. So a couple different routes we'll be able to see. So we'll also be able to kind of have a good look at different pull settings. And that's kind of what happens in Waycrest. You're not really able to have that perfect plan because you don't know exactly where you're going to end up going.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about this week, it's pretty nice. They both are on the same side this time, so we can actually see them, head to head on the same bosses as well, and they'll have similar less timings for the bosses on top of that. So interesting to see. I mean, it looks like it's just going to be which team, actually does better this time rather than just which one gets the better route.
And you're able to see, actually on the side of Train to Plate, they didn't opt to use Lust at all, so they will be able to have that and maybe make some extremely aggressive play on like first boss with Rawl and start pulling a bunch of trash into the boss and just let their Outlaw Rogue just go inside.
Yeah, I totally expect to see them use their Lust here since they didn't do that giant pull that we saw from Wind Train as well. Getting all the trash in the room, minus of course the infested mobs, which slow everything down a little bit. They'll pull everything in the room with the boss, probably with Lust, and just burn the boss down really quickly, and we'll probably see them pull ahead there, actually.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to see, the super aggressive plays. Because so many times you have to look at, while there are limited infested mobs, for example, in this week, that they had to actually deal with in this hallway surrounding Rawl, but how aggressive they had to end up playing just to be able to grab everything in together. So they're actually going into the kitchen as well to start grabbing everything in there, start moving back into position here, get a huge pull together with line of sight. Really have to watch out for the aggro here because everything is coming back to them. You're starting to see a little bit of a lost threat. Everyone's dropping kind of low here. So just stacking up everything together, grabbing all the threat, getting a really good trick to the trade. You are seeing Ice going down.
Yeah, having the rogue go down is really bad.
And Linux as well here. Tank going down as well. Full wipe going up on the side of Wayne Train here. Just a little bit too much, but I think there's also a bit of miscommunication as to where everything was going. You are seeing the Demon Hunter being able to drag everything back so they can keep the pull alive, keep some of the damage they had, but on the side of the threat, there's just no threat here for the tank to be able to rally and corral all these different mobs together here. So you're seeing Damon Harm going up. He's trying to be able to clear his stacks while still getting some aggro in on these mobs. Spit's going out onto the entire group here, but pretty good recovery, all things considered.
Yeah, if they can keep this going here and actually deal with this, now obviously they can just kind of death run this now. If they die, they can instantly respawn and they're right at the trash. But on top of the threat problems you deal with, these mobs actually have a lot of just group damage. The spits you have to deal with, the maggots, does just so much random group damage that it's actually really difficult to deal with anyways. Not to mention all the threat issues that they had. So it's actually pretty impressive to see that they were able to kite it back and deal with it, knowing what went wrong there.
Yeah, well, especially because I think it was just the boss being pulled with it, moving a little bit too close to it, pull the boss and just start nuking everybody down because the damage is ramped out way out of control for any healer to be able to deal with here. So I think it was just a little bit too much. I think we'll see on the side of Train Deplete just be able to pull everything into the boss. Bit of a safer option because the proximity range of pulling Raw can be quite a pain here. So grabbing a bunch of mobs in together. After they've cleared out the bare minimum for infesteds, they're not going to be having any of that engage while the fight is going on. I'm surprised they didn't actually opt to go into the kitchen as well, because there is a lot of little extra mobs that could start cleaving down there.
Sure, but on top of that as well, like all of the little maggots added a little bit of extra raid damage to the group. Like this pull right here with Lust, even on a tyrannical setting, is not necessarily that dangerous. The only real mechanic that they have to look out from the trash that they pulled is the silence from the stewards. The boss doesn't really add too much difficulty to the pull, just a little bit of extra tank damage. There's not really any more mechanics going out. If they do pull all the maggots in the side room, that's a bunch of extra group damage that they have to worry about. So this pull is a lot easier than the other pull we saw from Wayne Train.
Yeah, it's good to be able to see that working on catching up, but they do have the extra infested bomb. See if they can get a paralyze onto it, but the dots are still up, so he just ring of pieces it away. Try to be able to buy himself a little bit of time. Roots does go up onto the infested to be able to just keep it there and deal with it. It's just one of the, I believe it's one of the servers. It'll just have that AoE cast around him, so it won't be too terribly harmful for him to deal with there. It's just the steward, rather.
Right now, if you guys haven't seen what Roll the Gluttonous does, he's a pretty simple boss fight. He's pretty cyclical in how he works. He'll do 2 frontal casts, which put slime on the ground and spawn a bunch of adds that really don't do much other than tank damage. And then after doing that, he'll go into his Tenderize phase, where he'll do a large frontal AoE, which actually does pretty lethal damage to the group if you get hit by it. They'll do 3 of those casts, and then he'll spawn these servants that you see slowly walking towards the boss. Now, if those servants do run into the boss, he will consume them and gain a very slight damage buff, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal to worry about. Most people just let them walk towards the boss anyways, or use them for extra single target damage. As you see them doing here, pretty much, they're just leaving them up for the most part.
I mean, you'd love to be able to see just the extra focus on the single target damage, like you mentioned. It's very easy just to go all out and start nuking them down as rapidly as they can, but being able to optimize that boss damage, especially when you're in this this high focus race, really. It's only a 13. They're going to be able to clear it no problem, but being able to race against your opponent, especially when you can't see what they're doing, is going to be pretty big here. On the side of Train Deplete, pulling all of the courtyard in together here, making sure they're able to just get really strong focus on them as Wayne Train is just wrapping up Rawl. They don't have too much of the boss HP left available to them. At this point, no deaths on the side of Train Deplete, where you had that near full wipe on the side of Wayne Train. Nice advantage going into them as they're starting to move towards Soulbound. Also going to see, the extra time is going to take for them to be able to deal with that infested matron. Can just be very tedious, very annoying to look out for.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen so far in this dungeons is the dichotomy between teams that pull big and do risky pulls versus teams that do safe pulls that they know they can do 100% of the time. If Wayne Train's pull that they pulled earlier went perfectly fine, you might have seen them in the lead here. But because they ended up having that full wipe and had to kite it back, and the extra deaths and everything it's really going to cost them a lot here.
Yeah, just extra time, and that's the thing we've seen on lower keys many times in the past. I believe even with Team Spaghetti, for example, you're not going to be wiping from infested, kind of getting into these trash packs, but it just slows things down substantially. We saw one infested mob catch up to them after their large pull as they were trying to recover, and it just made it so much more difficult for them to be able to DPS through, so much more tedious for the group. So you're seeing them just try to mop up any of the extra infested mobs before they can move on to the courtyard, as Train Deplete is working on the Soulbound Goliath.
Yeah, Soulbound Goliath also is pretty much just a patchwork encounter in this situation in the dungeon. They're just gonna you're probably not gonna see the tank reset here at all. Being but either of these groups probably aren't going to reset their stacks on this boss with their tanks being as strong as they are. Also in this low key setting, so it's pretty much just going to be a burn the boss down and then sometimes swap to the ad.
Yeah, and as long as everybody's stacked up together, shouldn't really have too much to worry about in this fight. And like you mentioned, it's super good fight for Brewmaster Monk. Even with the gear that they have available to them, Blood Decay should be able to just face tank through and through, no problem at all. And we'll have to be looking as they're going to start moving towards the Heartbane Triad, see how aggressive they can pull, and also what the infested pattern is going to be in front of them and what they have to do there. They are actually positioning themselves to start clearing out. You're seeing the Demon Hunter, for example, getting caught into those thorns, need to be brought out pretty quick. But it's also, if he has to end up using any cooldowns on the side of Miantha, how worth is it going to be for the group when he could be using those defensives, making hyper-aggressive plays to be able to more quickly clear out the left wing of the group of the Manor here.
Yeah, and you can really see that the only real dangerous part of this fight is killing the. I just saw the Demon Hunter popping his Fall Barrage on the Soul Thorns that spawned there. It's really all you got to make sure of, and as a DPS, just make sure you're breaking your friends out. Wayne Train doing once again a very hyper-aggressive pull here, pulling almost everything in the court.
I like that they're able to kind of kite back here, make sure they're not pulling anything extra. You're seeing so many times the uproot can be so annoying to deal with here, knocking you back into other mobs, especially any kind of proximity to any of the infested that you'll start seeing around here. Just giving them space to be able to work with here. It'd be very nice to be able to see. I'm also just kind of curious to see the large-scale AoE damage going to be going out. Especially Assassination Rogue versus Combat Rogue in an instance like this. You're seeing the nice roots going up on the side of the Boomkin for Wayne Train to make sure he's going to maintain control and any of the infested mobs going around there. So I'd like to be able to see those plays. And just as everything is getting mopped up, those infested mobs getting broken out. Curious to see if they're going to chain it with the Matron like they're doing just now. Because the Matron can eat up so much extra time, they might as well just be able to compile everything in together as long as they're not going to have any little bug or have any of the infested healing each other.
Yeah, super efficient. They're actually making sure that they actually just did the entire courtyard in 2 pulls. Infested and non-infested, just like you're supposed to do. Very, very impressive from them, actually. Very we see more pulls like that from them over the course of the dungeon, they could possibly come back in this dungeon because Train Deplete is more going for more conservative pulls, but they also have no deaths as well. So we'll see if they can come back doing these hyper aggressive pulls in the rest of the dungeon.
I'm interested to see the players that Train Deplete, of course, working on the left side of the Manor here as their opponents are about to engage with Soulbound Goliath. So grabbing these guards and the captains, which are especially annoying because of the extra defensive aura that they put up for themselves, can be such a pain. You are seeing them Infested Mob coming up, Ring of Peace. We keep seeing featured throughout so many of these runs, especially from both teams. Being able to actually bump those mobs away has been insanely helpful for both teams. It saves them so much extra time here.
It's just one of the many things that keeps Brewmasters in the meta, even Mistweavers sometimes. Brewmasters being one of the strongest physical damage tanks right now, and on top of having that extra utility, being able to keep mobs away from, keep them away from where you are, and keep them away from the group if they're infested, so useful in these
at this point, they do opt to pull a couple of non-infested with their infested mobs here. Not too uncommon on these lower keys that we've been seeing, just because they're able to nuke down the spawn of Cahoons, because the spawns will, of course, be gaining more HP the higher level the Keystone, so they are just able to melt before they even get into the boss. They don't even need to drop any AoE stuns. They're just able to cleave it down, use the regular AoE to be able to knock it over. So great job there to be able to take them down. But you are seeing Train Deplete kind of furthering their advantage, still almost wrapping up all the trash percentage they need, while Wayne Train is just working on Soulbound and have a long way to go to catch up.
Yeah, and Wayne Train's Lust cooldown is back up, but they're opting to not use it on Soulbound Goliath. I'm assuming they're probably only going to get one more Lust in this dungeon unless they have another wipe, since they're not using it on this boss. If they use it on this boss, perhaps they'd get a third use of it in later on in the dungeon, but since they're obviously not opting to not use it, they're probably only going to get one more use out. I'm interested to see where they use that, if it's going to be on the Heartsbane trio or on one of the later bosses.
I'm kind of curious as well, because they needed to get around 20% extra trash percentage on the side of Wayne Train to be able to go down the stairs. It is teaming, so they'll need a little bit extra. So just by clearing the left wing and popping Bloodlust, the extra time it'll take for them to be able to go downstairs, clear out everything in Lord and Lady Waycrest's room, and then go on to Gorak Tool afterwards. It seems like it's going to be a little bit tedious for them. I'm not quite sure when they're going to want to actually time out their Bloodlust best.
Yeah, but Soulbound Goliath does go down with pretty much no problem. So you can see them moving on into the room that Train Deplete are already clearing over towards the Heartsbane trio. Heartsbane trio is probably the most dangerous boss in the dungeon, in my opinion. It has the most mechanics to deal with. Each of the trio has their own unique aura on top of a unique ability they do. The first one will be mind controlling a member of the party. The second one will put a large amount of AoE damage on top of the group. And the third one will be doing probably the most dangerous mechanic, the Jagged Nettles, which will do a massive nuke on one of the players and cause them to take extra damage until they're healed over 90%. So we'll see how they deal with that boss. Trying to play pulling it right now.
Yeah, but you're seeing the good setup here on the side of Wayne Train. I think he did actually end up missing. Yep. So he's going back, grabbing some of those extra mobs that he missed. It looked like the pull was like a very aggressive play. For example, if you're pushing a hierarchy, since they're doing these 13s, they should be able to pull as much as they possibly can. East is dropping down very, very low. They got to be able to top him back off. Cheat Death does go up. He is using Cloak to be able to try to sustain himself just a little bit better. Some of the kiting coming up on the side of Wayne Train as Team Deplete, like you mentioned, is going into the Heartsbane Triad here, trying to make sure they're able to extend their lead and be able to come away with this game.
No, I completely missed it. Did Wayne Train just randomly pop their Lust while they didn't pull anything? Because their stated cooldown has a minute on it.
I think they popped it really early in the pull, and their tank wasn't quite ready for grabbing everything in together, so he had to go back with Bloodlust still up, grab some of those mobs, and that's why he kept kind of losing threat there. There was a lot of damage on the melee DPSers, especially just because of how much damage they were doing during Bloodlust, and they couldn't really waste their Bloodlust there because it had already been popped very early. First Witch is going down on the side of Heartsbane Triad here for Train Deplete.
Yeah, it looks like they didn't really have any issues here. Getting these witches down one at a time pretty simply. These mechanics aren't really going to do much to them at the end. As Melody goes down, they're not going to take any damage here. And the last thing they'll have to deal with is Briar, with maybe one more Jagged Nettles cast, but they're healthy. Nothing's going to happen to them here. They're looking pretty strong.
Yeah, and just having that strong coordination, making sure you're having the kicks available to the reduces so much extra damage here. Wayne trying to finish up their pull at 78.5% for trash, grabbing both sides in together. Doesn't look like they have to worry about any infested from either group. So just digging themselves into a corner here. That way they're going to have some room to be able to move up the stairs if they need to, move away from any of the dead frogs that are coming up and might be disorienting any of them. And making sure they're doing a great job with these captains, making sure they're interrupting any of the defensive auras that they're putting onto themselves here. So allowing them to be cleaved down very quickly and easily. I like being able to see that kind of coordination there. Just Wayne Train, 87.5% up on trash. Engaging with Heartsbane Tree. It looks like they're gaining a little bit of ground over Train Deplete, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough at the rate that Deplete has been going.
Yeah, they're definitely coming back a little bit. There were a few. They pulled Soulbound Goliath maybe a couple minutes after Train Deplete killed it, but they're actually pulling Heartsbane Trio just right after Train Deplete killed it. So they're definitely coming back in the dungeon, but like you said, I don't know if it's enough for them to come back all the way.
Yeah,
also, why you gotta mention the dead frogs, man? Why you gotta do that?
Aw. Poor Kermit. Train Deplete coming down and grabbing everything in Lord and Lady Waycrest's room here to be able to get it all down together. And at this point, it's just going to be movement for this pull to be able to see how well they're going to be able to, move out of any of the candles that are going to be coming up. Kicks, interrupts to be able to quickly move those mobs away. You've seen the warding candles going down. It looks like they're also just pulling Lord and Lady Waycrest along with the remaining trash packs. Did a great job actually moving the Lord out of that field, which he just landed right on top of to start in. But these are the aggressive plays that you have to make, and this is what's going to maintain Deplete's as they're going into this. So very good job here to be able to see the pull. You only have about half mana on the side of the healer for Elliot, but at this point, you can just be playing pretty safe. The damage out of Lord and Lady Waycrest in the first phase here, when Lady Waycrest is free casting in the back of the room, it's not too heavy on the tank. But you will see quite a bit more extra group damage going out. You just have to be able to kind of pace yourself and not over spam into Essence Spawn or anything like that. Lean on efficient Vivify cast to be able to make sure you're sustaining people.
Yeah, and honestly, this was the kind of pull that I was expecting to see out of Wayne Train here for maybe a potential comeback in the dungeon, pulling all this trash with the boss. But if Train Deplete's able to get through this and pull it off like it seems they have, now that they're stable and they're on the boss, I don't really see any way for Wayne Train to get back in this game unless we see just a full-on wipe from Train.
I think they're going to have to emulate the Fem Clap and grab all the ghost mobs after this boss, pull them into Gorak Tool, and just be able to nuke them down ridiculously quickly or something like that. And hope that Train Deplete's also playing very slowly at the same time.
Yep, and we're seeing Wayne Train use their cloak to get through this cellar area that really no one wants to deal with. Definitely the smart play. A lot of teams, almost every team will do this in a progression key and a push key, or just in a speedrunning setting. Most of that trash is pretty dangerous. It's just a handful of all the trash you've already dealt with in the dungeon, but all at the same time instead of just one by one. Very fun. And we do see them doing this hyper-aggressive pull where they pull all the trash with the boss. If they can pull this off and do it cleanly, do it quickly, maybe they have a chance of coming back in this dungeon. We'll see.
And at this point, this is just what they need to do to be able to stay in. You're going to see a lot of those extra fragments in the left side. With the raid frames there going out onto everybody. So quick dispels to be able to start clearing them. If you don't dispel any of those fragments in time, they're a pretty long dot, around 20 seconds. They are consumed by one of the witches and buff her damage, so they can also be purged off as well. So any extra dispels will substantially reduce a lot of the tank damage going out, because it always will prioritize the tank first and then start casting onto other players. But you can also just opt to be able to quickly purge off any of the buffs that any of the casters are getting onto themselves as well.
Yeah, really impressively done. They're actually almost halfway through the fight already. The Lady Waycrest is already... Well, I did see her sacrifice once before. I mean, that was her second sacrifice there, so they should be halfway through the fight. And her health bar is not actually representing that, though. I wonder what happened. She'll come back down after this next one.
You should see a third sacrifice coming up really quick. And again, we're seeing grabbing all of those mobs. They haven't pulled Gorak Tool just yet there. So they're just mopping everything up. No Fem Clap to be able to be represented here. But full resources, everything ready for them. 100% of trash as they're entering Gorak Tool around 21:30.
Right, and this is a little bit slower than last week's pull that we saw from Fame for Fem, but to be completely fair, they're a lot rarer IO rated average than this team is. So this is actually a super impressive run so far. I don't really foresee them wiping to this boss, especially after the nerfs that happened to it. The ads are so easy to deal with at this point that all they really have to do is DPS the boss down while taking care of the ads cleanly, which they can do very easily with their Outlaw Rogue and Havoc Demon Hunter comp here.
Yep, and previously you had to be knocking back any of those Death Touch ads to be able to interrupt any of their channels or casts using grips, Ring of Peace and such. Now you can be able to drop any kind of stuns on them. They're very susceptible to all kinds of CC, so you have a wealth of tools available to actually knock them over. can deal with them super easily. Wayne Train here just finishing up Lord and Lady Waycrest here as they're moving on to Gorak Tool's room. So they're running full speed ahead, and it's like they might just stack it up and try to do whatever they can to be able to take down Gorak Tool with all the ads. They are stacking everything up together, but Train Deplete's already at 50% as they're grabbing all of those mobs in together here.
Yeah, and we do see. Oh yeah, Wind Train just dealt with the boss, and they are reporting back to deal with the. Wait, what? Oh,
it looks like there's a little bit of a
yeah.
We're seeing a different angle of the pull going.
Yeah, so we are seeing them from this different angle pull the Gloom Horrors out into the boss, and yeah, at this point it's just a DPS race. They shouldn't wipe. They could wipe to the AoE damage from these Gloom Horrors, but considering they have other cooldowns up here, they're probably not going to. However, they are just so far behind on this boss, it's going to be almost impossible for them to come back from this.
At this point, really, Train Deplete is really just cleaving down any of the ads on their own. They're not really putting a lot of target focus, allowing them to be cleaved down and just tunneling down Gorak Tool. 3% left on the boss here. And Train Deplete look to be in an incredibly strong position, taking the game 23 minutes and 33 seconds.
And we get to see the loot.
And the loot.
And loot.
Check the loot.
So there it is, guys. This was a tale of two trains leaving the station. Only one could be the winner. It was today Train Deplete. So looking back, this was definitely a match with a lot of big pulls. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But in the end, I think most of those pulls actually did not help Wayne Train in the end. So what are you guys thinking after watching this match? Got a little interesting there at the end.
I think a lot of it was coming from the initial setup and the extra little wipe pull where Wayne Train was actually just trying to be able to pull everything into Rawl's room, from Rawl's room, pull it out, and then just pulling the boss there really scuffed them up and caused a massive amount of AoE damage. You're not really able to reset Rawl in any efficient manner. He doesn't move anywhere, so you're not able to drag him out of the room. So him just nuking the entire group before the reset actually went out for him. It was only really the Demon Hunter that was able to survive and bring all those mobs back to the front. That really saved them a little bit of time. And if they didn't have that wipe, if they didn't have the extra 20-25 seconds of deaths, they might have been able to actually see a much closer race there. But they had to be able to put themselves in damage control and really do what they can to try to stay in it.
Zyra, looking at these comps again, we had two different setups with tanks and healers. We had Train Deplete running the DK Monk, and then we saw the Brewmaster Resto coming out of Wayne Train. Do you think that played into the result here?
I don't really think it did so much. I think the biggest difference we saw in these dungeons is kind of the different dichotomy you see in MDIs. You have two different types of teams. You have the teams that go for the big pulls every single time, and if they do pull it off, it looks really impressive, and they're probably going to win. And then you have the team that goes for the safe, secure pulls 100% of the time that they'll rarely ever wipe. And this kind of goes back to last MDI when we saw Method and A versus Shell's Angel. Shell's was the team that liked to pull huge, and it actually ended up working out for them. If some of those big pulls in the MDI didn't go for them, we probably would have seen Method and A winning. But we kind of saw a mirror of that here. One of the teams pulled very safe and never died, and one of the teams pulled big, and unfortunately one of them didn't work out for them.
All right, well, we are going to take a really short break, guys, because we only do have the two casters. We're just going to take a quick break now while we get the next match queued up for you guys. So hang in there just a quick minute, and we'll be coming back to you with our next match, which is, of course, again, an awesome rematch between Paint for Femme and the boys and ladies play children. So hang in there. Back soon. All right, we are back. Thank you guys so much for your patience. We got your next match ready to go. So as we were teasing before, this is a rematch. We are once again seeing Paint for Femme versus Polite Children. These are two really evenly matched teams in terms of their Rio score, both sitting around 2,600. And NA's NA versus EU battle. Last week we saw them in Waycrest Manor. This week we are going to Temple of Sethraliss. So Jack, let's start with you. Predictions. What are we going to see in this rematch?
I think the game, I believe it was Waycrest last week that we saw from Paint for Femme and Play Children, really kind of got away from Play Children. Some of the extra mobs getting loose or some along those lines. Paint for Femme really just had a lot cleaner setups to be able to allow their just massive AoE damage to be able to start clearing everything out here. So I think at this point, Play Children wants to be able to get that game back. They want to be able to show what they really can do. And you will start seeing, a lot cleaner of a run, especially since Sethraliss has a lot more linear of a route, and it's a lot more predictable, I think, than Waycrest. Instead of having to have 2, maybe 3 different routes kind of in mind as to what you want to do, it's very clear cut, very straightforward as to what you can actually pull off, and there is going to be a lot of boss focus there. So I'm actually looking forward to a really close match between both teams.
Zyra, what do you think? Looking at the DPS, really pretty evenly matched, similar comps, fairly similar item levels. What are we looking at from them?
Yeah, it's actually super similar here. Once again, we see the rogues running different specs here. We have Okira on the subtlety, with Dranos playing combat. Once again, subtlety more focused on single target / focus damage, where Outlaw's more just general AoE damage. That's going to be probably the major difference here. Also of note, used to Bricky here is playing Fire, not Frost. Not really too much of a difference here. Fire probably has a little bit more burst damage. Other than that, not too many differences here. Once again, last week in Waycrest Manor was it was very much a game of inches. So I'm interested to see if Polite Children can be a little more clean this time and pull out of it.
All right. Well, it's enough waiting. It is time for the rematch. So here we go.
Starting it up in the Temple of Sethraliss here. Let's see if we might have a couple technical difficulties here as we're getting the game together real quick.
Hang in there. We're back. Do the gameplay here in just a sec.
Here we go.
Hey, here we go.
All right. Enjoy the match, guys.
Something I do want to mention before we get into this. Last week we mentioned how both of these teams have this great MDI pedigree with Jason on ZQs on Polite Children, as well as Shelley from Method PogChamp on Paint for Femme. We completely missed Waffle Sauce, also an MDI competitor last year in both of the previous MDIs. How can we do that?
It just can't be done, right?
Unfortunately.
I believe that actually our... Okay, sorry, I was saying that Polite Children was running with the mage earlier. You're all right. They have a Waffle Sauce going into it for them. So you are seeing quick rogue skip to be able to actually get into a really strong position, have a huge Bloodlust pull coming up into this, grabbing a bunch of the extra mobs in together. And since we are on teaming, a lot of these pulls are just a lot larger, a lot more maybe annoying to deal with, especially when you have to deal with the marksmans, for example, with their poisons going out here. So absolutely annihilated this pack and start chaining it on to the next. And they also have excellent timing, grabbing that Shrouded Fang in together. You are seeing the stun going out onto the Demon Hunter, onto Shella there. Great job to be able to actually kind of bait that out for the tanks. The tank is not going to get stunned instead, and making their life quite a bit easier there.
Yeah, that's actually a great example of knowing the dungeon and being perfect with your timing. If you do these dungeons enough, you know where the invisible mobs are going to be. They're in the same spot every single time on a timer. So knowing where that mob's going to be, walking over there, getting it aggroed, very showcase of their knowledge of the dungeons there.
That's right, and Paint for Femme getting the first boss pull in here, focusing themselves onto Adderus there, and keeping themselves in pretty close cleave range. There's a number of different classes that are able to cleave off onto aspects at the same time and not get any of the extra lightning shield damage. Or instead, if you have something like Cloak of Shadows up or any defensives up, you can actually just reduce a lot of the damage you're taking and still cleave off onto it without too many consequences, as it's also a 13, so it shouldn't be too tedious for them to really deal with.
Yeah, getting into the mechanics of this boss really quick. It's very similar to Heartsband Trio. Instead of two bosses, instead of three bosses, there's only two bosses this time. And instead of them having the orb, they have the lightning shield, which means you can't attack them. If you hit the lightning shield, you'll take a lot of extra damage and probably end up killing yourself. So you see them spreading these out pretty evenly, pretty far away from each other, so that they don't take any extra cleave damage. Batters will do a lot of extra AoE damage to the group when he doesn't have the lightning shield from aspects, the cyclone strikes and the static shocks going out. We're going to do a lot of AoE group damage. Now, I do want to mention that this is also from about 4 weeks ago, before Cyclone Strike was fixed, so you'll see some weird Cyclone Strike interactions with the group where it's not quite going where they're facing. That's just because it used to be bugged, unfortunately. But we do see them swapping targets a lot with the lightning shield.
They do a great job actually keeping an eye on where Adderus is facing, because with that bug, like you mentioned, it would face one direction and then start pivoting and following the tank. So being able to watch the first position that it was locked into and then being able to start moving on from there was extremely, extremely important. Just to be able to maximize their damage and also to be able to make sure they're watching out for any of the extra cyclones that go off, because you have that Cyclone Strike combo right into the Static Shock, which can just be absolutely lethal, even on a 13.
Yeah, definitely, even on a 13. Getting Cyclone Strike into Static Shock is probably the #1 killer on this fight, I'd have to say, other than just face damaging into Lightning Shield, like a Mongo sometimes.
Sound like you have experience with this.
No comment.
Don't worry, I can drain through it, he said. It'll be fine, he said.
Nah, I'd never say that.
Oh, okay.
I don't see anyone helping Fim tank the breath here, unfortunately. It looks like the tank might... Oh, never mind, he's fine. He's a warrior tank.
That's right, warrior strong, man. Clearing out some of this infested really quick so we can get on to the fun claps. And just be able to see how aggressive of a pull they're going to go into. There's a lot of other trash mobs up here they can deal with. They do have to take care of the striker first. That way we'll be able to take down any of the cloud that is covering up and obfuscating the marksman there. So great job being able to obliterate that striker. Move on to the double marksman that they have to deal with, because we are on teaming. And then they'll be able to start pumping out quite a bit of damage here. So interested to see what they're going to pull from the rest of this kind of apex, or this little kind of turn section, as they're moving on to Merektha's room, where they'll be able to make some incredibly aggressive pulls, and that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, a lot of times in push keys, you'll see groups shroud here to get past most of this trash. Unfortunately, they do pull the patrol here. I think that was an accident. They weren't supposed to pull that, but they do end up pulling a little extra here. That might slow them down a little bit. Pulling only one mob at a time in these high-speed, speedrunning style keys, you don't want to be pulling only one mob at a time. It's very inefficient, very slow, and we'll give a little chance for Play Children to catch up a little bit here.
Yeah, I think part of it was also because that tamer can actually not be seen. They just saw it right in front of them, and maybe they just said, all right, well, I guess we have to pull this. We have to deal with this, so we might as well just go into it now. But yeah, and that's something you have to be able to plan for. Or on the side of Play Children, they move right into Merektha's room, where they're going to be able to make some extremely aggressive plays here. Looks like they're going dead center into the middle of the room, grabbing all of these tenders, stacking all of them up. And also moving on to the left side pack as well. They're grabbing everything that's not infested here to be able to make some really big plays. And this is what you need to be able to see happen.
This is actually a massive pull. This is a massive pull, and there's so much going on in the script. There's so many healers. If any one of these single heals gets off, it's just going to increase the difficulty of this pull by that much. On top of that, you see the tenders over there draining, using them. It's a fantastic ring of peace to stop those drains. If those drains gets off, it heals them. It gives them a buff. If the heals get off, they heal. It makes this pull that much faster. But they're dealing with it very cleanly right now.
Yeah, I love being able to see the treants going down very quickly. You are seeing Mischief going down. Quick battle res from Waffle Sauce to be able to get her up very quickly. ZQ dropping extremely low here. He does an excellent job disengaging from combat, getting out of there, creating space, and continuing to move around. He also has a very fine line that he needs to be able to walk, because there still is that infested rider. So incredible plays there by Jason to be able to keep himself alive, get out of combat from these mobs, get out of melee range from them, and then be able to engage the infested later on. So it takes a lot of knowledge of what room you have available to him, but movement abilities that he's got at his disposal, and he did an excellent job there, being able to recover from what could have been a wipe.
Yeah, definitely walking the line there. Like, any extra time spent on that, and they're pulling that extra mob and maybe having problems with that pull. We do see Pain for Fim actually doing the exact same pull and maybe pulling it off even a little cleaner. That doesn't feel like they had any deaths there. So
power
equally impressive,
really.
Yeah,
that's one of the interesting things. That's one of the interesting things comparing the different tanks that you have available to them. When you're looking at, for example, Rested Druid and Prot Warrior versus maybe Disc Priest and Brewmaster Monk. Brewmaster can round up those mobs, mitigate an incredible amount of damage, but when you're comparing the raw damage at a Prot Warrior is not trying to live forever. It's not trying to get out of combat or to be able to have any kind of prolonged pulls. It's just trying to clap and obliterate everything at once.
Yeah, it's kind of just a DPS that happens to have also have a shield on, you know?
Exactly. And that's one of the big benefits of if that pull starts going on a little bit longer, starts taking up more time, then you might start seeing, some more disadvantages for Prot Warrior's mitigation or something like that compared to a Brewmaster. But if they just obliterate everything in time, you don't even have to worry about it.
And that's the nature of these speedrunning keys. You're not sitting there fighting the same mobs for 2 minutes like you're doing in like a 22 key. You're able to focus on doing things quickly and getting things done efficiently rather than just trying to outlast them.
And that's an interesting thing to be able to see how the different group compositions are, even when you're playing at the top level that your class has. I think you have to be able to kind of compensate in some ways to be able to play maybe a little bit more aggressively in some cases to be able to make up for that. So they're making the Brewmaster play a little bit more aggressively than maybe the Prot Warrior would want to risk. That way you're able to have your DPSers playing and dealing a little extra damage on top of it. So overall, pretty close here as we're going on to Merekta, entering into that second intermission phase there. The first phase you are dealing with the Ophidians. The second phase you're dealing with the Strikers, who are making those different dust clouds that they have to be able to push everybody out. So you start seeing the Typhoon, making sure they're pushing everybody out of them, as they are going to be starting up this final phase about at the same time here. So in the first phase, we saw just the frontal that was coming up, dropping any extra goo on the ground. And the second phase brought us the Blinding Sand. So the third phase is going to be bringing us both of those. At that point, it's just making sure you're turning away from the Blinding Sand, baiting out any of the frontal breaths appropriately, and being able to burn the boss down before the last set of ads start coming out and causing more problems for you.
Right, and we did see a slight hiccup from Pay for Fim there. We had Fim going down in the second phase, which is somewhat surprising, but they did just use their battle res there. It wasn't too big of a deal. That does make it so they don't have that battle res later in the dungeon, and as we know, the last boss is sometimes kind of a pain here, so we'll see if that actually does bite them bite them a little bit later.
Yeah, great job there, passing through the Lightning Orb Gauntlet there. And it's interesting to see the difference between these two Shroud packs, right? You were seeing Polite Children gaining a little bit of an extra advantage by pulling earlier into Merekta's room, whereas Pain for Femme is going into Galvast's room a little bit earlier than they are from the Shroud skip here, right? So at this point, very important that the only one DPSing is going to be the Rogue from Trix or from the Warrior. That way they'll be able to get all of these dervishes stacked up on top of each other, as they will teleport to the target with the most threat. So great job being able to get everything in and stacked up together. I'd love to be able to see the Typhoon into Ursul's Vortex, get a nice tight stack, and making us wish we had the Bloody K.
Yeah, but to be fair, they actually are doing a great job of keeping this stacked here. These mobs do teleport to players in the group occasionally, so as long as they're relatively well stacked, they're going to stay stacked and easy to AoE down, and you see that here pretty easily.
And at this point, all they have to do is just wait for a little bit of extra RP, and they're on a great pace to be able to pull Galvast early, as Polite Children is just now doing that exact same pull that we were just seeing out of Pain for.
Right now, Galvast is more of a... It's kind of a weird fight. It's both a healer check and the DPS check. You're going to see these players taking turns soaking beams. Now, if these beams don't get soaked, they'll increase the boss's energy, and if the boss gets 200 energy, he'll explode, potentially doing raid wiping damage. Usually will one-shot everyone in the group unless they have a immunity or a large amount of personals up. However, they won't be able to soak consecutive beams because they get a stacking debuff. So you'll see them swapping off soaking beams, usually between 3, sometimes maybe 4 people.
Yep, and they do a great job standing in the middle of the room. That way they'll be able to have a good view of all of the different pillars, and they won't have to risk multiple beams going onto the same person at once, like if they were going to be taking it in the corner. And like you mentioned, the stacking debuff can rise extremely quickly. The tank damage can get extremely high, especially the higher level key that you end up going.
But we did see them commit their loss to this fight on the side of Pain for Fim, so they should be getting it down relatively easily. I don't foresee them having any problems with this fight. However, Polite Children does not have Luster available for this fight, so it's going to be a little bit of a longer affair, and as fights like these go on, longer and longer, we're going to see them possibly dipping lower and lower, and might even see some dust on this.
Yeah, and that's where you'd be really looking towards how aggressive you want to be with your defensive cooldowns as a heal. Being, for example, on the side of the Disc Priest, being able to actually have kind of a holding pattern, really, with like Rapture available to you to be able to put massive shields out onto everybody. And love being able to see the speed pots there on the side of Pain for Femme to be able to actually get through the lightning field, the lightning gauntlet before it actually even spawns. So really cool play to be able to see there, but it does look like they ended up using one of their potions to be able to do so. At least they'll be able to have it start resetting as they're moving forward, grabbing all of these extra mobs in together here.
Yeah, generally what we'll see teams do here is they'll have their tank go in, get aggro on almost every single mob in the room, and then the DPS and the healer will be left to just be able to deal with the orbs on their own while not having to worry about any of the other mobs in the room. Then once they have both of the orbs in the head, the tank will die, they'll res him, and they'll move on to the last boss. And it looks like that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and at this point, even on a 13, it might just end up clapping everything down together and shouldn't actually take that much longer to be able to deal with here. Compared to just having everybody die and rezzing off the back of it. Problem will come from a lot of these infested mobs they have to worry about, and that might cause them to just die instead, because it can be very tedious to be able to try to AoE everything down altogether on top of it, but we'll have to end up seeing. Great job here. You're seeing the disengage coming out really quickly out of Shella to be able to get in position, take care of the orbs really rapidly here, and get themselves moving on to Sethraliss's room.
Yep, and they are committing their invisibility push here to get to the boss because their shroud is unfortunately on cooldown since they used it only 3 minutes. But that's definitely way more efficient. We're going to see them do the pretty typical strat that a lot of groups will do in progress here, where they'll pull the boss, they'll get to the last phase where they get the giant Giga buff, and then they'll pull the rest of that trash in the pack along with the boss while they have the huge damage taken debuff.
I really like this positioning. If you're seeing on the side of Pain for Femme, that's like the one sweet spot they're able to stand. So they had, the Rogue, Demon Hunter, and Druid making sure they're staying out of combat. The other two that did end up in combat just go out and die, try to get as close as they can. And then you have this one safe spot right on that crystal, or just right off the crystal, that they're not going to be pulling any of the mobs in front of them or behind them. They'll be able to get the mass res off and then grab all the hexers in together here. So I love being able to actually see that extra little bit of optimization there. So they're not wasting time killing mobs that give no percent. They're not wasting a lot of time wiping the entire group, getting it rezzed, getting set up, and then using Shroud or Invispot or anything like that. They're clearing out those orbs, staying out of combat, and then being able to immediately be in position to res and continue going out throughout the dungeon. So I love the planning on the side of Pain for Femme.
Yeah, definitely very efficient pulling from them and very solid execution as well. We are seeing Polite Children pull this with everyone in combat instead of waiting for the tank to get aggro and pulling it all to the side. So I'm interested to see if they're just going to AoE this down here or if they're planning on all dying. I'm not quite sure what they're planning on doing. They might be just doing a full-on death skip here, pulling everything, dying, and then full-on rezzing.
At this point, it looks like just the play to be able to, like we've seen previously, get themselves in a better position. Mistress going down first. That way they'll be able to get the battle res out onto her, and she'll be able to res everybody after. So good play to make sure they're getting that done. But Pain for Femme, a little bit of extra advantage. They're already in the first phase of the boss. They're already getting up the first orb to start healing Sethraliss up, and tremendous advantage that they have going into this.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's too much of a time increase. They had to wait for everything to reset. And on top of that, they do have to factor in the 25 seconds from all 5 members of the group dying. So while it definitely was faster time-wise putting the orbs in the skull on the dungeon timer, it might not necessarily been a time increase for them. Definitely interesting to see 2 completely different strats for that puzzle room, though.
Definitely. But you're also seeing actually the Heart Guardian staying up on the side of Pain for Femme. Femme's got 4 stacks of that extra debuff, so it's about 200% extra damage taken there. You really need to be able to neutralize that rapidly, so he's not going to be getting clapped himself. So on the side of Polite Children, they're just starting up Sethraliss, getting the encounter started as Pain for Femme is about to be hitting that last intermission phase, then getting the super buff from Sethraliss, pulling the last of the trash percentage they need, and being able to clear out the rest of the dungeon from here. So overall, excellent plays.
Yeah, once you get this giant buff with 50% damage reduction, huge haste, huge damage buff, there's really no chance of wiping. We saw at BlizzCon, even with explosive, with 10 explosives spawning and going off, they were in no danger. So at this point, the dungeon's kind of finished. Pain for Femme is beaten Polite Children once again in another very, very impressive run.
It's interesting to be able to see, we talked about some of the differences in the pull pattern that we have going into it, but also when it comes down to it, just the raw damage that you're able to have and how group comps might start kind of changing just a little bit to be able to reach for as much damage as they really can. So Pain for Femme with a +3 on the 13 Sethraliss. An excellent job there. Super clean plays, and just the high level of aggression we've come to know and expect from them.
Yep, so like Jack just said, what we really saw were two really evenly matched teams. And despite a few pretty exciting Live Lord moments out of Polite Children, unfortunately, they just could not take the win again this week. And we do see them coming in first. So since they were evenly matched, when we go back, guys, are we thinking that it was small differences in strategy? Was it a few mistakes by Polite Children? What did give them the edge once again this week?
I think the major difference we saw in strategies there, because the execution from both teams was pretty much spot on. There wasn't really too much other than we had maybe one death from Mischief at on one of the trash pulls and one death from Fim on the second boss. But other than that, the execution was pretty much the same. The major difference was how they used their shrouds and their invis potions. Paint for Fim got 2 uses of shroud, and they also used their invis pots at the end of the dungeon, whereas Polite Children really only got 1 efficient use of shroud off in the dungeon, I believe, and that ended up saving them a lot of time.
Oh, definitely. Jack, your thoughts? I think it was.
I think that a little bit of the extra optimization was really what won the day for Fem's group. To be able to have the stronger setup, to be able to get in the position that they needed to, round up everything together to be able to neutralize it was really what won them the day. Being able to make sure they had three of their group stay out of combat the entire time, get the invis potions off, committing those because they knew they'd get 1, maybe 2 extra potions off instead. Those are the things that really started helping out quite a bit and making sure they're able to slowly gain a little bit of advantage over their opponent. And that really was just the clean execution that we've come to know and expect from them on these groups.
If you guys did like some of that gameplay out of Polite Children, we do have some this week for you guys. Also, Dratnos, Rogue for Polite Children, recorded his own POV and I think added a voiceover to it, and he's going to be putting it out later on social media, and in chat can probably confirm when he's going to be able to do that. But give you guys another look at that match. So let's look forward now to our final match of the day. And this is going to be Spaghetti versus Wayne Train, who, of course, we saw in match 1 today. And is this going to be a chance for Wayne Train to pull off a win? It's possible. Hopefully, they'll get that win today. And another little fun fact about Spaghetti, if you've been following Keystone Masters, this is technically our 4th overall broadcast, and in our very, very first match, we had Zuon, who is playing for Spaghetti today. He was playing in Ook, and good guy, of course, lots of closeness, everyone's friends hearts in the MDI community. He is filling in today for the boys in Spaghetti, so we're glad to have him back once again. So let's look at this matchup today. These guys are a little bit lower in their Rio scores. Both matched about 1,800, 2 EU teams, and they are going to Shrine. So with these comps, what are we expecting to see today, Zyro?
I mean, I think the major difference you're going to see here, especially in Shrine of the Storm, and Jack can more talk about this better than I can, but the huge difference here you're going to see is that Disc Priest. On the final boss, Disc Priest can pump out some massive damage. If these teams are relatively even going on the last boss, I think Team Spaghetti definitely has the advantage.
I'd absolutely agree, especially when eye level is very close to them. Druid, especially when they pop into Rest of Druid, really can pump out insane amounts of damage onto it. You also have to look at the extra threat of being in melee range versus being in range, being able to continue hitting the boss, for example, whenever any of the AoE fields are going out from. Because even just one tick of them, even if it's on a 13 or something like that, is enough to be able to one-shot you when you lose 90% of your HP. Going into any of the mobs in the second phase or in the intermission phase, for example, just drawing aggro for just a second, for example, when you're having to sit into melee range can make such a huge threat onto and really hurt a lot of your damage overall. Whereas just being the Disc Priest, being able to stand out at range, being able to fade off any kind of extra threat is a tremendous advantage that we're going into there. But also I'm really curious to see what kind of skips they're going to be going into. We've seen so many times where working and trying to optimize how groups are going to be skipping any of the mini bosses or grabbing them with a massive amount of trash or something along those lines can make a tremendous impact on how the run is going to go. So the routes are probably going to be the biggest thing for me to be able to see out of both teams.
All right, well, enough talking about those routes. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's see if Wayne Train can get a little redemption on the day and take the win, or will we see Spaghetti with our buddy Zuon? pulling in first.
Spaghetti all
Off
over.
we go. Spaghetti. Oof.
No, you gotta keep that spaghetti in your pockets, Jack.
Yeah. Sounds messy.
Alright, Shrine of the Storm. I can think of about 9 other dungeons I'd rather do than Shrine of the Storm.
Really? Man, well, it's kind of unfortunate when you don't have the DPS buff.
I mean,
You don't know what you're missing.
I heard Blizzard was watching your stream and they heard you complaining about how you had to keep giving it to the DPS, so I just decided to fix it for you, so.
I mean, when you have it on lockdown.
You see Spaghetti actually pulling both of these packs together here. Very massively pulled. Not really too much going on in these packs other than the 2 attendants doing their Water Blast and Castaway.
Yep, and we've seen previously how impactful those extra casts can be on higher level Keystones when you let them kind of run free, but when you're able to stack everything up together and let the DPS do what they do best, tremendous DPS to be able to wash all these attendants away and put themselves in a strong position here right off the bat.
Now, remember what you were saying about the skips thing. A lot of teams here will opt to skip almost all of this trash. Just go straight to the first boss. It looks like they're either not confident or practiced in doing it, or they just don't want to. They just want to get some of their trash percentage here because they're not be skipping more later in the dungeon. But we are seeing them do these little smaller inefficient pulls here on this bridge, whereas most more practiced teams will just skip all of this. They are pulling a lot of extra trash from the bottom though here.
Yeah, this is a difficult pull that Wayne Train's trying to be able to get together here because you do have so many casters and no real grips to be able to speak of here. It's possible, but it's often very dangerous and will involve a lot of extra casts going through onto the tank here. So he is able to kind of corral everything up together. Thankfully, there's no Sanguine to be able to worry about. Thankfully, we're in outdoor piece. We're not having to worry about all the extra water blast damage, how many casts can go off from this point. It would be a massive inconvenience here. So great job being able to get everything up and corralled together. Great kicks on the group, always cycling through different kicks to be able to get those mobs in together and taken down. It's interesting to see if they are actually opting to pull the water elemental alongside it, because like we mentioned, this oftentimes is a lot more inefficient and a lot more tedious to be able to go through.
Yeah, impressive use of LOSing and their group's abilities through Solar Beam and Ring of Peace to actually group these mobs up. They're doing a very good job of making sure things are stacked up. Now, that large AoE knockup, you can line of sight it, but it looks like they're just opting to face tank it in this 13 Tyrannical. Not too much going off, but if that does go off with multiple of these washaways, water blasts, anchors going off from these attendants, they could see some lethal damage going off in the groups here.
Well, they're also in a pretty poor position because they have the double Templar, and they've been struggling to actually clear out any of those protective auras from the Templar. So right now on the side of the tank, he's actually really struggling to maintain and get aggro on these extra attendants, pushing a lot of damage onto everybody else. He's dropping extremely low here. He's gotten multiple stuns, multiple frontals from the Templars that have stunned him into the living current stun. So really rough position there, but they did a great job being able to recover.
Yeah, fantastic job from them. It was actually very dangerous. The Shrine Templar making everything around taking reduced damage is actually super dangerous. And we see Spaghetti doing a similar pull with the Shrine Templar here, making just increasing the length of the pull, making things around them live longer is just super dangerous for these tanks. And we do see them accidentally aggroing mobs that they definitely didn't want to pull here. They got knocked back into those mobs, so that's just two extra casters they have to deal with in these packs.
They're also spiritualists, so having to completely lock those down in case they're going to get any of their healer casts off can be so annoying. You are seeing Treants going out here, so he is going to be able to have, reduce quite a bit of extra damage onto him, allow the Dispriests start pumping out a bit more damage, have greater focus onto them. So good recovery again, but these are some of the mistakes that on a higher key would just be those instant wipes.
Yeah, pulling those extra spiritualists is it's really bad for the group. The spiritualists are the ones that do the healing casts, and having to commit your interrupts to locking only healing casts down instead of just getting rid of extra AoE group damage from the washaway cast. The water blast is just super dangerous in these giant pull situations.
And Spaghetti making another aggressive play, grabbing all the little droplets in together, as well as those attendants. There's those two attendants just down the stairs from Aquasur that just kind of take up extra space. You have to be able to chain them up with something that's available to you. And because the mini-boss that we are going to be seeing, the first mini-boss after Aquasur, is going to be infested, they want to be able to grab those earlier and engage with them. Wayne Train getting the first pull in onto Aquasur here for the group. And they did opt to make that very similar pull, grabbing all the attendants in beforehand.
I don't really know what it is about this boss, but whenever I see people pull this, or I pull it myself, I think bald people. You ever think about that?
Pretty regularly, to be
I think
honest.
I think someone bald designed this boss. I don't know what it is.
I think we all know Jack thinks about the people. But...
There's no time or place for that kind of conversation, all right? Going into the boss, tell me some of the mechanics around it, you know?
Yeah, so you see this undertow here. He'll target a person in the group and push them back. He obviously is trying to push you off the edge, but if you just run into him, he's not really going to do much. On top of that, he'll randomly root people in the group, which you can stun to get people out of. And on top of that, he'll also put a bunch of void zones on the ground that you dodge out of. When he gets to 50%, he'll split into 3 smaller versions of himself, which will all do the exact same mechanics. The most dangerous part of the fight is probably when these 3 do his charge mechanic, which does pretty much one-shot damage and has the opportunity to knock you off the edge, which makes it so you can't be battle rest. It looks like everyone dodged it, fortunately, though, on the side of Wind Train, so nobody will be going down to that.
You gotta keep a close eye on Spaghetti to see if we can get any big grip plays, save anybody falling off the ledge. Any familiarity with that one, Zarana?
No, I'm a Warlock, so I play with Portals, so even if I do get knocked off, I can just port back, and it looks like I'm a really good player, even though I got hit by a mechanic.
That's right. Big plays to be able to push out there. Aqualing phase starting up on the side of Spaghetti. Important note, make sure everybody is within melee range of one of the mobs, so you are seeing the Disc Priest on the side of Spaghetti. Making sure standing in range of one of the Aqualings to ensure that it's not going to start free casting onto one of the players. So just as the Disc Nashtar stands out of range, the Aqualing starts spamming any of the extra water blasts onto a target with the highest threat. So important that they're able to make sure you're staying in melee range to prevent that, as they can just start focusing one singular target and pumping an insane amount of damage out onto them if you're not.
Right, and we did see Team Spaghetti commit their bloodlust to that split ad portion of the fight, just making sure that they get at least one of the ads down before they charge. That is the most hectic part of the fight, when all 3 ads are charging in 3 different directions. Only having to know where 2 of them are charging versus 3, it's a lot less to worry about in that situation. We see them moving to the first of the mini-boss section of the dungeon. In between the first and the second boss, there are 3 mini-bosses that all have mechanics that are echoed on the second boss. So this first one, Windspeaker Hedris, will put a haste rune on the ground. On top of that, he'll have a cast that you have to constantly coordinate your interrupts with your group in. And it looks like Wayne Train got it down relatively quickly.
You are seeing him grabbing everything up to that rune carver there. I believe the rune carver was infested, if I saw it correctly. So I'll be very interested to see how they're going to be able to get past that, if they're going to opt for any skips. We've seen previously there are some shroud skips you can do that can be very tight, and you have to make sure you're getting through at a very precise window of time during the distract as it's going off, as there will be the true sight onto the rune carver that you have to worry about. So be interested to see if they're going to be able to skip it, because it does eat up a tremendous amount of time if you do have to deal with it here. And I love being able to see, treants going down, being able to have the tanks stand in there, generate additional threat before, any of the mobs are going to go down. A lot of times you'll start seeing after the treants start going down, tank will start opting to start to kite with all the threat that they've been able to generate. But Spaghetti, similar pull coming up, grabbing all the non-infested mobs there, dropping D&D, working on getting some extra threat together. I've seen the rogues start opening up early with Tricks of the Trade going on to Siligosa. And overall, this is going to be the same kind of thing that we want to see, that strong execution, clean execution, getting the Master Grub up so that it interrupts any of the apprentices, any of the Iron Hull apprentices who are doing their AoE spam, going out onto it, interrupting everything all at once, grabbing it in together, so that DPS can maximize their uptime.
Yeah, and you see the difference between the groups here. They're both using all of their utility to make sure that these whirling death casts don't go off, so that their melee can have 100% uptime on the AoE here. And we saw the different uses of it. The Brewmaster uses Ring of Peace to knock the cast, the DK uses Grip to interrupt the cast, displace them. They're also using all of their stuns. They're committing every single part of their displacement to interrupting these casts and making sure their melee have 100% uptime DPS and makes them go down that much quicker. Wind Train already dealt with the second mini-boss, surprisingly quickly. And then moving on to the third, Guardian Elemental.
That's right, and I'm kind of surprised to see them not actually pulling the Guardian Elemental into the rest of the group here, as it does, Wayne Train on the side of them does actually have the Guardian Elemental up with them. So they're not really worrying too much about any of the line of sight. Priority is just going to be having everybody stacked up together in the Efflorescence, being able to have as much healing onto the group as they ever need to. At this point, you really have one quick global to dispel the debuff the Guardian Elemental pulls out, which makes their target take extra damage from the Shipbreaker Storm. So you have to get that spell out immediately. Then the Shipbreaker Storm starts, and you have to work on catching everybody back up there. So great job there, grabbing all of the extra adds in together. quickly nuking them down, so you only have to deal with that Guardian Elemental. But still, these mini-bosses just continue to eat up a lot of time. So if either team was able to practice and optimize some of the extra skips they'd be able to do, it would be in a much more favorable position.
And we also do see Spaghetti just now engaging with the Guardian Elemental as well. So they're just a tiny bit behind, maybe a little bit less efficient, but it's still very, very close. We didn't see anyone using the LOS for the Shipbreaker Storm and the Guardian Elemental. Good flexing coming from the healer there. I'm interested to see if they'll maybe have to do it for the Guardian Elemental, but it looks like they're going to be just fine. They're going to DPS right through everything here.
And if they're able to, from one of the ranged DPS, if they're able to line of sight the cast that goes out onto them, it can be extremely helpful, but otherwise it's not too great of a benefit whenever you're able to just nuke everything down or just get a quick dispel out onto it. I'm a little surprised to start seeing Shadow Covenant on the side of Najjatar instead of running with Sin. Able to play a little bit more aggressively, having that extra damage boost can be extremely helpful here.
Yeah, we did almost see the Priest go down there, just standing in a bunch of AoE mechanics. Would have been really unfortunate to have them go down on that healing intensive mini. We see Spaghetti doing a massive pull with all the initiates here, as well as every single non-infested mob in this entire section of the dungeon.
And like you mentioned, with the threat of any of the extra tornadoes going out, this is exactly the position we're in. We're going to have a lot of tornadoes coming out, some of the swirling tornadoes that emulate Gale Caller, as well as any of the ground effects that you're having the Priest moving out of right now. All those different threats they have to watch out for in the group, and with the limited space that they have available, because they did CC all the infested mobs there, so it's very important that they have to maximize what little space they have at their disposal, continue moving, continue kiting any of these mobs, any of the tornadoes that the melee might be standing around, and they're doing a great execution at that point.
Yeah, they're really making life easy for the melee here. As a melee player in this section, it's very easy to just get overrun by tornadoes, have to move out for slams, not be able to be in melee and do your damage. Impressive use of solar beam stuns and whatnot to make sure that the melee could always be in there doing.
Wayne Train starting up with the Tide Sage Council. All the focus is going to be onto Gale Caller Faye at the start of the fight. They do have to watch out for any of the AoE that she will be casting and setting up a good interrupt rotation here. The Slicing Blast will put a debuff on, will deal a little bit of damage to everybody in the group, and will also make everybody on the team take extra nature damage unless they stand in one of the debuff fields that Brother Ironhall is going to end up setting up. So very important that they're watching out for any of the hindering cleaves from Ironhall, while also moving Gale Caller Fail really quickly out of his defensive field, because that will remove all dot and debuffs from Faye, as well as the debuffs that she will apply to everybody in the group.
Yeah, I can hear the Boomkin complaining about his dots being removed right now, so that's better start moving quickly. Really easy, simple floss, especially with 3 melee, making sure you have that 3 melee kick rotation on Gale Caller Face so that none of the Slicing Blast gets off. They're doing a very good job of it so far. Very few debuffs have been going out, and they're being very, very clean here. Oh, this Boomkin is so sad right now.
Oh, no. You hate to see it. Absolutely hate to see it. And when you're seeing it for the entire group, the extra damage lost from it can just be absolutely heartbreaking. I also have to see if we start having any extra mobs being pulled into this, as the extra swiftness field that Gale Caller Faye does put down offers a tremendous boost in terms of the raw damage they can deal for the entire team. So seeing any teams that might actually end up pulling extra into those would be super helpful there. But again, yeah, for both sides, you're seeing, Gale Caller Faye dropping their dots, reducing their damage just a little bit more. And that's where the extra practice, the extra optimization these teams could take makes them go so much faster when they're able to pull it off correctly.
There's something to mention here between the two teams. Both of them are getting Gale Caller Faye down at roughly the same time. Spaghetti maybe 20-30 seconds behind. The thing I noticed more from Wayne Train is that they had a lot more cleave damage onto Brother with the group. Brother was maybe at about 55-60% when Gale Caller went down. Spaghetti had Brother at about 80%. So a lot more efficient damage coming out from Wayne Train. Maybe they were more, confident in their DPS and their kick rotation. But they were very, very, very clean. They probably got more haste fields out of it because of it too, making this boss go a lot more smooth, a lot more quick for them. And they're at 10%, while Spaghetti's still at 50%. We're going to see this boss go down probably 30-40 seconds.
Faster you are, brother. Wayne Train just mopping up the last of the boss, while Spaghetti is on 40% left. And you're right, it'll be about 20-30% left. Or sorry, 20-30 seconds left. Wayne Train is engaging with the Ritualist here. Important to be able to get a quick Blood Elf or a quick Mass Dispel out onto the little extra ships, the extra skeletons that they do have, as they do have quite a substantial shield here. Interesting to see how large of an enforcer pool they do end up going into, because this is going to be that teaming week. So there's a number of different enforcers that are going to be coming out and can be extremely deadly in large amounts.
It's interesting to see Wayne Train use their committed arcane torrent to killing off all the small ads there. They don't really do much with these affixes this week, so letting a sub-rogue gain extra single target damage on the main mob in the group, on the ritualist, it seems like it'd be better to leave them up, and we see them doing that on this pack here. They're actually leaving the small ads up. I think that's definitely the play.
Especially when you have that larger infested that you have to be worrying before you're able to pull anything on top of it. So they'll be looking at just trying to single target down that ritualist as best as they can before they start moving on to grabbing pretty much all the other ritualists they have available to them. They can make some pretty good plays, kiting them around the room. Be interested to see if they opt to grab those enforcers, maybe pull them into the room that most usually end up skipping. Around 72% right now. They will need to be getting into probably into the 80s.
Yeah, it looks like they're probably going to be pulling all 5 enforcers here. They do have a brewmaster tank, which is very good at kiting, so he can just kind of kite all 5 of these enforcers in a circle while his DPS AoE them down. I think very impressive use of their class mechanics there. On top of that, using the Ring of Peace to make sure they stay away from him. This is just class knowledge 101 right here.
Yep. And being able to maximize whatever tools they have at their disposal is going to be great. And just staying right out of range, so he will be able to hit them with Russian Jade Wind, while also making sure he's not getting hit by too many of the deep smashes at once. Because even just getting hit by 2 at once was absolutely a tremendous amount of damage that was going out onto it. You are seeing the Shroud going up. They could have just opted to have the Rogue Sap or the Demon Hunter Imprison, so maybe they're using the Imprison for something else. Going up through here, they might just be able to Sap Imprison some of the mobs that are ahead of them right here, and then be able to grab some trash packets later.
Yeah, that was... Oh, they're committing their invisibility potion. This is unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a weird commit.
They might not know about the ability to just out of combat CC those mobs. If you do, like you were saying, if you do sap/paralyze or sap imprison those mobs, you don't get in combat with them, and you can just run right by them, and then you can use your shroud for the bridge. A little unfortunate they won't have their DPS potions for the next 10 minutes because of that. But it's not that big of a deal, right? They get through it just fine. We can see Spaghetti pulling the 2 mobs in here, and we can see why this is actually so inefficient and why so many groups skip this. There's so many spread out mobs all over the place. It's not efficient to AoE these down. On top of that, there's a chance that one of the people in your group just gets focused down by all the abyss tentacles, and you could get an unlucky death here. But they do deal with it relatively cleanly.
They do deal with it, indeed, and Wayne Train is mopping up the last of these tentacles going out here. Looks like they might just be positioning themselves to take care of this right caster pack, where you have the 3 cultists and the 1 Depthbringer. Really, the only deadly mob here is going to be the Depthbringer. The cultists will just kind of spam some of their more defensive-oriented abilities and buffs onto themselves, like Detect Thoughts, as well as, I believe, it's the Consuming Void as well. But if you just get everything into the Solar Beam from the Druid, you're just able to do it, absolutely obliterate all of them, and not have to worry about too much at all there. So great job there. They're able to clear off any of the extra buffs that are going out onto them. Wayne Train's in a great position to start pulling Lord Stormsong and extending their lead.
Yeah, well, actually, both of these groups are going to be pulling the boss here. Almost, it's exactly the same time. Spaghetti started in the RP a little bit later, so Wayne Train will have a little bit of an advantage here. But they're going to be pulling this boss at very close to the same time, and it's actually really impressive how close these teams are this far. And we do go into the side-by-side here. I like that.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to see the side-by-side. I believe this is just shortly before the nerfs to the boss came in, but both teams are actually almost exactly the same in terms of trash percentage there. So a little bit of extra optimization, not having to worry about, for example, using your invisibility potion, maybe getting those extra DPS pots, having a little bit extra advantage there for the rest of the instance might be enough to be able to pull them ahead. We also know that there will be a tremendous advantage at the end, be able to actually pump out a little bit extra damage on the side of the Disc Priest, unless the rest of Druids prepare to take some great risks to be able to min-max, but any of those little risks can cause them to lose the debuff and the damage that you gain as well. So very cool to be able to see a face-off that looks to be brewing between both teams, as they are extremely close together right now.
All right, going into the mechanics for Lord Stormstorm really quickly here. He's got 2 or 3 major mechanics. Number one, you see these shadow balls floating around the room, fixating players and slowly walking towards them, or floating towards them, I guess. If you do come into contact with one of these shadow balls, they will stun you and do a massive amount of damage to you. And the only way to get rid of them is by running into them. Now, you did see someone just get targeted by the Ancient Mindbender. When you do get targeted by the Ancient Mindbender, you want to run over as many of these Shadow Orbs as possible, dealing damage to yourself and breaking yourself out of the MC. We saw them pull that off really cleanly there outside of Team Spaghetti. All of the Shadow Orbs are gone until the boss says, no, you get some more of those now.
Yeah, right as they're able to pop Icebound Fortitude from Siligosa and start cleaning up some of those extra balls, give them a little bit more room. They also found that the higher level Keystone that you go, the more damage you have to deal onto that Ancient Mindbender afflicted character. So when there's not too much pressure onto them, you're able just to sit there and let the Ancient Mindbender player soak up any of the orb, make it so you don't really have to worry about too terribly much here. So Zuan getting any of those orbs and have to just clear out the last couple ones remaining, making sure that he's not going to be getting stunned in the process by standing too close or taking 2 at once. Able to get back with the group, and you only have a handful left remaining, as the pause percentage is just incredibly close between both teams here.
Yeah, this is going down almost within a second of each other here. We definitely have a race here. They have the exact same amount of deaths on both sides, well, actually, not quite. The timers are a little bit off. Only 1 death on the side of Wayne Train, so this is impressively close. I'm curious to see, is the Disc Priest going to be the difference here?
Also need to be able to see how well they're going to optimize the buff. If they're pulling, for example, any of the Sunken Denizens in front of the boss right now, or they're going to opt to pull the boss first, wait till they get that buff, get out of the intermission, and then be able to start working on them, versus just using them much later on or pulling them right away. Where they're going to be pulling the eels at, for example, if they're going to be optimizing sub-rogue damage. Very interested to see what they're going to be going into here. It does look like Team Spaghetti is grabbing any of the Sunken Denizens to start with. You just have to make sure you have strong kicks onto both those caster denizens really quickly. Both teams actually doing almost exact same pulls going out here.
Yeah, and I'd like to see them be able to get down one of the before they run out of melee interrupts here, so that they don't actually have any heals go off. And it looks like they're going to do that pretty cleanly here. With only 3 melee, it's impossible to get all 4 kicks every single time. You just have the 1 backup solar beam from your druid. So if you do take too much time to DPS those down, there's a chance that they get their cast off and heal to full, similar to what they do on the boss.
They do a great job at mopping those up. 98% trash completed on this side of Wayne Train as they are pulling the boss here for Volzith. Same thing on the side of Spaghetti. Similar trash percentage as well. So both sides are just going to need a little bit of extra heal. Start mopping up the rest of these mobs here. And important to be able to start watching how they're positioning Volzith across the room, maximizing their space here. Grass of the Sunken City is going to start teleporting 3 DPSers into one phase to deal with 2 casters that we just saw, while the tank and the healer will be dealing with that Sunken Denizen here.
Yeah, and the other thing to notice is that both of these teams have almost exactly equal trash count. They only need about 2% more trash. So we might even see them pull some eels into the boss here, because they both have rogues, which will benefit from the single target damage of that. And in whichever team pulls that off more clean is probably going to be the team that wins this.
Exactly, you're right there. They did a great job on the side of Wayne Train, optimizing and knowing when each side would be able to get out, so that their tank was going to be able to drop that extra interrupt onto them. So at this point, it's going to be that raw DPS race that we really want to be able to see, pumping out as much damage as they can during Bloodlust. Any kind of damage effect that will go out onto the healer will just kill them. They will be able to kill these manifestations because they deal very, very light amount of damage if they choose to. But if they're able to just keep on knocking them away, you're seeing the Shining Force going up on the side of their Disc Priest there. They will be able to keep on kiting away from those mobs and be able to extend the amount of damage they're able to deal without having to actually end up killing any of them.
I know you're loving this PoE, Jack.
I love the boss. If only more people wanted to actually go into, Shrine of the Storm.
Nope, get me out.
More damage.
Both of these bosses at almost the same percentage are both below 20%, both incredibly low, but it looks like both of them are going to get one more down phase here. Unfortunately, they'll have to deal with ads one more time.
And this is kind of a scary situation for the side of Oro. If he's going to be able to get neck deep into melee and not have to worry about dropping threat or stealing threat off. It's always one of those threats that you have to watch out for here, but Tank doing a great job of being able to sustain. They quickly take down that Denizen and start moving on to the casters. Both teams equal race here. Wayne Train's got a little bit of an advantage getting their caster ad down a little bit faster, but very, very close race we have going on here.
It's neck and neck here, man. It's neck and neck here, man. This is crazy. It'll come to tiny things like who gets the interrupt off first, who's gonna DPS the boss on first. And they still have the trash percentage out here too. They still have the trash percentage.
Yep, the boss is going to be going down really quickly. You're seeing Spaghetti grabbing it. But one of the mistakes here is that if they did end up just like we saw out of the temple, if they had opted instead to pull those eels into the boss like Wayne Train is doing right now, they will be able to maintain the damage buff that the healer did get and will be able to kill them so much more rapidly here. So they're just trying to find one mob that they're going to be able to focus down, maybe 2 eels be able to focus down here, get them killed very quickly. They do it. Wayne Train will take it against their opponent, Spaghetti.
Wow.
It was just pulling those eels into the boss, allowing that extra damage.
Less than a second difference between these two teams, and that's that. I think that's what it came down to. It's just pulling the eels into the boss with the DPS buff there. That was impressive play. Impressive.
So definitely, I mean, that is the closest match in our brief but already legendary history here at Keystone Masters. So let's talk about these 2 points. So first, let's talk about Wayne Train going back during the RP.
Yeah, that's just honestly time efficiency. Whenever you get to the third boss in this dungeon, what a lot of teams will do is they'll kill 1 pack of the tentacles. Someone will go start the boss RP, then your group will go back and pull the second pack of tentacles during the RP so that you don't have any downtime. We saw one of the groups do that, and then we also saw another group just kind of run towards the boss and kind of just wait, which ended up losing them precious seconds. And as we saw in this dungeon, seconds can lose it for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Really, and I mean, couldn't afford.
Yeah, that's kind of a lead in then to the second thing, the eels. Like, how much did that kind of play into, like I said, just 1 second of difference here?
Yeah, and when you're able to have the extra cleave damage, the extra bonus damage out of your healer doing just as much, if not a little bit more damage than everybody else, it's extremely powerful to be able to quickly get all of them down. A lot of times you'll see groups, instead of pulling those trash mobs positioned right in front of the boss, they'll opt to just go around, pull the boss, avoid them until they get the damage buff, and then use it to absolutely obliterate them, the trash later on, even going around in a circle, clearing out all the eel packs they can. Gives them a tremendous advantage there. So you were able to see just a little hint of that, but it'd be cool to be able to see teams do that a little bit more often. Really min-max as hard as they possibly can there.
Definitely. And I mean, a lot of times one of the things we would look for in Shrine is differences in mini-boss strategy skips, but I mean, these guys were just super well matched the entire time. So what surprised you guys the most in this matchup?
I think the way they pulled the dungeon was a little bit weird. I was surprised that neither team opted to go for the super flashy shroud slow fall or shroud skip.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
I wanted to see that, but unfortunately both of them just kind of went for a more safe approach to the dungeon where they slowly pulled towards the first boss. And since they both did it, it was impressive.
It was interesting to see how close the routes were together, especially when you're looking at specific regions or specific branches of Raider IO score. How teams can kind of find out what's meta and what they're used to be able to running with, but also where they can further optimize, where you're seeing, if they were doing just this, that would help them pull ahead a little bit. If they were, grabbing all the mobs with the damage buff, if they were using the sap into Imprison to skip that extra room with the tentacles that were coming out, that helped them out a little bit there. How they plan out those routes, how they execute onto them, even if it is on a lower key, it just continues to compound how important it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think that's just another mechanic of what we talked about last week, where these teams don't get to practice the dungeons. They just get to talk about it, and then they go into it. This isn't like the MDI setting where teams are practicing these dungeons for weeks beforehand and have every single interrupt, every single pull worked out to the tiniest T. They're just kind of pulling. They have a strategy in mind, and then they just go into the dungeon and see if it works.
So looking at the day as a whole, we have our 3 winners today. You guys, we've got Train Deplete, we have Paint for Femme, and then Wayne Train that we did see twice today did pull off the win here at the end. So that concludes Keystone Masters for today. But we want to update you guys on what is happening in the future for us. So we will be taking a break for a few weeks. Raid Progress obviously is going to get started soon, with Heroic coming out next week and then Mythic the week after that. So we do plan to try to regroup with you all, or for you all, maybe sometime around mid-February. And of course, pretty soon after that, we'll be getting into Proving Grounds, and MDI will be roll. So from our entire team, everyone behind the scenes here at KSM, that is Automatic Jack, Sierra, J.B, who was not here today, Shine, Sours also missing for today, Zyronic, all of us work on the show. We want to just remind you guys, it is, of course, just a labor of love. We're all volunteers, and nobody is compensated for their time here. We do have to say that. Thanks, you guys. Any final goodbyes or anything you guys want to say before we take the break?
I just wanted to say thanks for everybody for tuning in. We just recently had some of the MDI announcements coming around, so very cool to be able to see the future of 2019 for Mythic Dungeons. Really excited to see what comes next.
Absolutely.
All right, and yes, super exciting. So we will actually probably even have even more to talk about the Mythic Dungeon International in a few weeks, guys. International. All right, so guys, lots of love from us. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you in February.